The shadows lifted, but only enough to reveal a starker truth. Elara was still in the obsidian cell, still breathing the cold, stale air of the citadel, but she was no longer merely a thief. She was a captured element, a living catalyst. Kael's shadows had retreated, but their power lingered on her skin, cold and intrusive, a constant reminder of the binding that was no longer an assumption, but a fact. The Shadow King did not return immediately. His methods were always indirect, always weighted with psychological cruelty. Instead, the heavy iron door opened silently to admit not a guard, but a servant, a creature of lesser darkness, pale and silent, who brought a tray of food that Elara knew better than to touch. The servant did not speak, only bowed, his eyes never meeting hers, and vanished back into the blackness. The message was clear. She was valuable, but still property. Elara used the quiet time to re-examine her situation. The amulet, the stolen relic, was now hidden beneath a loose floor tile, its faint, warm light barely penetrating the thick obsidian. She was unharmed, but she knew the king's forbearance was conditional. He had claimed her, and immortal claims always came with an eternal price. She began to test the air, the silence, the boundaries of her cage. She moved slower now, conserving her mortal energy, the true value of which she was only beginning to grasp. When Kael finally returned, it was not with a dramatic entrance, but a quiet materialization by the cell door. He was observing her, a shadow that had decided to assume form. His elegance was chilling. His movements were economical, suggesting boundless energy held in check. He wore garments darker than the room, and the air around him felt several degrees colder. "You did not touch the sustenance," Kael stated, his voice a low, smooth baritone that resonated through the stone. She stood slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I don't eat in a cage, and I don't trust the provisions of my captor." Kael let a flicker of something, amusement perhaps, or a predatory assessment, cross his features. "Sensible, but unnecessary. You are more valuable alive than poisoned, Elara. Your life force is currently the only barrier between my curse and the total consumption of my dominion. It is inconveniently crucial." "Then you've just admitted your weakness to your captive." "I admitted your utility," he corrected, "a different metric entirely. The rules of your stay are simple. You will remain within the designated area. You will not attempt to leave Viridian. You will not speak of the curse to anyone but me. In return, I will provide your needs, and I will not permit the lesser shadows to feed on your light." Elara took a step forward, her voice hardening. "I don't take orders, King, and I won't be your human tether. I will escape." Kael leaned slightly closer to the bars, and the oppressive weight of his power settled over her, chilling her to the bone. "You will try, and every time you fail, your price will increase. Your curiosity is what brought you here. Your defiance will be your true undoing." He ordered the servant to bring her a new set of clothes, silks, the color of muted crimson, a final, beautiful irony in the black cell. He wanted her to look like his treasure, not his prisoner. The gesture infuriated her more than the chains. Days blurred into nights. The boundaries shifted slowly. Kael began spending hours in the cell with her, observing her, not speaking, just watching the way the amulet's faint solar energy interacted with the shadows of his curse. He never touched her, never moved closer than the space mandated by the invisible force field around him, yet his presence was more intrusive than any physical contact could have been. During these silent vigils, Elara began to piece together the truth. Kael's power was not constant. It pulsed, it flared, and it often left him visibly strained. The curse was a parasitic power that devoured him from the inside. And her presence, her sheer defiant light, was like a flawed, temporary dam against the torrent. She realized he didn't hate her light. He desperately needed it to survive. This understanding gave her the first true leverage. "The silence is grating, King," she finally said one evening, breaking a silence that had stretched for 2 hours. "Tell me about the curse." Kael hesitated, a reaction Elara logged instantly. The curse is the cost of my reign. I sought power beyond the pale. The price was the absorption of the shadow realm itself. I am not its king, but its unwilling heart. It demands absolute obedience, absolute isolation, or it destroys me. And the absolute isolation is why you needed my company, Elara challenged. Because the shadow demands solitude, but your soul can't bear it. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kael's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a frightening recognition of truth. You are reckless with your words, thief.
And you are careless with your vulnerabilities, she countered, pushing the advantage. You defend yourself with power, but your soul is broken. That curse is demanding more than isolation, isn't it? It demands a replacement, a sacrifice. Kael stood up abruptly, moving toward the iron door. The conversation is over. No, it's just beginning, Elara persisted, driven by a recklessness she couldn't control. The shadows only touch what is already cold. My presence stabilizes you because my light is active, alive. But the curse is learning, it's adjusting. Soon it will demand a more direct connection, King, and you know it. Her words hit their mark. Kael paused at the door, his shadow hand clutching the cold iron. He turned back, his expression a mask of torment. You have an instinct for pain, Elara, he conceded, his voice strained, a dangerous one. The next night, the tension reached its breaking point. Elara had continued to needle Kael, challenging his decisions, testing his control. She had noticed his eyes were shadowed deeper than usual. He had not slept, had not rested. His control was fraying. A sudden violent tremor shook the citadel, an explosion from the city above. A rival faction, likely the ancient Fae who resented the Shadow Court's dominion over Viridian, had breached the outer defenses. Kael's calm instantly dissolved. The shadows in the cell flared, not around Elara, but around Kael himself, turning into aggressive dark claws that ripped at his clothing. The curse was seizing the moment of stress to destroy him. The Fae, Kael hissed, fighting the darkness writhing over his skin. They chose their moment well. Elara forgot her defiance and saw only the torment. The king, powerful beyond measure, was being physically torn apart by his own essence. She instinctively stood, moving closer to the invisible barrier that separated them. You must focus, she yelled over the low, ambient roar of the citadel's defenses. Contain it. I cannot, Kael gasped, his voice cracking. The stress, it is too much. The curse demands a drain, a release of energy. It will consume me, and then it will feast on the city. Elara stared at the shadows consuming him. She looked down at the amulet hidden beneath the stone, the soft, useless light of the sun. Then she looked at the man. His humanity, broken and buried, was screaming beneath the monstrous power. Release the barrier, she demanded, her voice firm. Now. No, Kael spat out, struggling to retain control. It will kill you. It will kill you first, she countered. I am your battery, your shield. You need a direct connection to stabilize. Let me pass. There was a moment of absolute, devastating silence, broken only by the shriek of the building structure under attack. Kael knew she was right. His logic, cold and desperate, won over his fear. With a wrenching effort that caused him to collapse against the cell door, Kael dissolved the magical energy field. The obsidian room was now free of barriers. Elara didn't hesitate. She moved past the remnants of the dissipated shield and placed her hands, warm, mortal, utterly alive, on Kael's face, forcing him to meet her gaze. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. The aggressive shadow tendrils enveloping Kael's body halted. They did not retreat, but they softened, wrapping around Elara's arms instead, no longer seeking to harm, but seeking contact, seeking the light. A searing heat, not painful, but overwhelmingly intense, shot up Elara's arms and settled in her chest. Kyle gasped, his eyes wide, the monstrous shadow receding momentarily to reveal the agony and shock of the man beneath. His power stabilized, but the curse found its direct link. "You fool," he whispered, his voice trembling as he realized the depth of her sacrifice. "You just gave it everything." Elara could feel the ancient, cold power of the curse coiling deep inside her, a dark, heavy knot that demanded more. But for the first time, she saw no king, no tyrant, only a broken man dependent on her reckless life force. "We are bound now," she managed, her breath coming fast. "We fight this together, King. Now, deal with your rivals." Kyle looked at her, his expression a devastating mix of desire and devastation. He slowly raised his hands and placed them over hers, his eyes never leaving hers, and his shadow power, now anchored by her touch, flowed out to repel the Fey attack. The shadows retreated, leaving them alone in the besieged citadel, their hands pressed together, the curse an intrusive fourth party in their devastating proximity. Their relationship had moved beyond captor and captive. They were tethered, sealed by the shared experience of pain and the devastating taste of forbidden power that now flowed between them. Elara knew with chilling certainty that she was no longer just the thief. She was the king's anchor, and he, her exquisite torment.
They were doomed, irrevocably, utterly, and passionately.